In this lecture, we are going to build the feature of filtering our list of facts by category. So here is what we're going to do. So whenever we click one of these buttons, our data will reload, but only the data will arrive that have the category equal to the one that we clicked here. Now let me start by telling you how this will change the query. So let's get first rid of this here. And so now right here after the select, we can write .eq. So eq stands for equal. And so here we can now only load all the data, so all the rows of the table which have the category equal to, let's say, technology. So again, this is just to show you what the query will look like. So basically what we need to do here with the Supabase client in order to get the category, in this case, equal to technology. But we will then generalize this for whatever category was clicked. So let's see. And indeed, now we only get technology. So that's exactly what we specified here. But now, how do we actually get our application to know which of these buttons here was clicked? So remember that as a result of clicking these buttons, the user interface will change. So it will reload. And so once more, that is a sign that we need state. And so that new state variable will basically store which category was clicked. So we will need that piece of state then right here. So in this useEffect function, and therefore we need that state variable, so that piece of state here in the app component. So let's do that. Let's call it current category. And then set the current category right here. Okay. Now here, what do we want as the default state? Well, let's say simply all, which is the name of this one here. And we will then later handle this state and also the other states here when we build this query. So doing this here, so the Supabase client dot all of these things is what we call a query, because we are, so to say, querying the database on the server. Okay, but anyway, before we can do any of that, so before we can now generalize this here to all categories, we first need a way to actually set the category. And so again, that will happen when we click on these buttons. And so we need to get this setter function to these buttons. So let's copy this. And these buttons are inside the category filter component. And so we need to pass that function to that component. Okay. And now inside the category filter, we need to accept this prop that we just passed into it. So that should be down here. So just like before, we immediately destructure the props object and get from it this prop called setCurrentCategory, which is of course that function. And so now we want to add this here, so this function, to all of these buttons. And let's start with this one here. So on click. And now we need to create a function here, just like before, which is a callback function that will get called by React as soon as we as we click the button. So what we will do in this function then is call set the current category to all. So this is also the default state. So that's for this button right here. Okay. And now let's simply grab this and paste it also onto these other buttons. But here, of course, we will not set it to all, but to exactly the name of the category. And so that name is coming from cat.name. So let's grab that and paste that right here. All right. And now we can already test this a little bit, at least by using our our components React dev tool. So we need some more space. And so that state is in app, right? And so these are the 4 states where, let's see. So where this first one here is the show form, which is false. Then this one is our list of facts. The third one is the is loading. And here we can also experiment with this. So this is how we can see the loading on and off, right? And then finally, we have the current category. So when we now click one of these buttons, that should change. And indeed, hopefully you can see that down here. It did change. So here we get all, technology. And yeah, really, whatever we click is now what we get. Great. And so now all we need to do is to use this state value right here where we actually query the data. So let me show you how. So let's get ourselves some space. And we now basically will create this query here in multiple parts. All right, because in the end, all of this is actually just an object. And we can build that over time. And then in the end, we can simply await the result of that. But let's see that with code. So we can create a variable, and let's actually call it query. And then we will say Supabase. And basically we will say what we have here all the way until this category check. So let's copy this here. And so this is the first part of the query. And this one we will always need. All right, but now let's say if the current category is different from all, then the query will be equal the current query, and we will also add this part. Okay, and so then here we await not Supabase anymore, but query. Then we no longer need these. And then just like this. Okay, give it a save. And this will not do anything yet here. Also because we still have a bug here. So right here, of course, we no longer want to hard code the category, but we want to get it from the current category. But anyway, let's now recap what we actually did here. So we started by storing the result of simply saying which table we want and then selecting all the columns. So we stored the result of that in this query, but we are not loading any data yet. So this is not loading the data, it is just to build the query. And then here in this case that the current category is not all. So this here means different than. So if it's not all, it means that it's one of these here. And so in that case, we only want to load the facts that have this selected category. And so then we add to the query object, so to this variable, the equal part. So what I had shown you before, right? And then here we take that query object, add the things that we also had before already, so the order and the limit part, and then we await all of that. So only here where we actually have that await is where we then do the data fetching itself. All right. Now this is not yet working still. So if we click here, then nothing will happen. And the reason for that is, remember how we said at the very beginning that this effect, so this function here, will only run in the beginning. So only when the application first loads, right? But now we actually also want to load the data as soon as we click on one of these buttons. So as soon as this current category state changes. And the way we do that is by adding it here into this dependency array. So that sounds, again, a bit confusing. And actually React should give us a warning here because it is indeed mandatory to include it here. Right? Well, for some reason React's not doing that right now. But anyway, we need to place that here into the dependency array. And so now, when the value that is here in the array changes, which will happen when we click this button, then the entire function here will get executed again. And therefore, our data will get loaded again. And so that's exactly what we need. So let's try that. And yeah, beautiful, that's working. All right. And I know those were, again, a lot of moving pieces that we had to fit together here. But the answer is almost always to use some state. And in this case, it was the current category state. And then the other trick was to add it here to the dependency array of useEffect. And so then this function here is always executed whenever the category changes. And so with this, we can click here, then this effect runs again, and the data will load again. Now this actually has the effect that sometimes we get this empty list here, basically. So before, when we were always loading all facts, there were always some facts. But now, for example, when we click here on news, there are no facts with that category. And so if that's the case, we want to display some other message here saying that. And so let's go to to the component that actually displays this list. And when there are no elements in the facts, then we want to just display some kind of message. So as I was saying before, in the real world, we actually place each of these components here into its own file, and then we don't need to scroll around so much. But I think that actually for teaching, it is even more confusing jumping around multiple files all the time. To give us some more space, let's close that. But yeah, here we are already anyway. Okay, so now let's do something here. So what I will do is to say if there are no facts. So how can we know if there are no facts? Well, we can simply say if facts.length equals 0. Right? Because the facts is simply an array. And if there are no elements, the length will be 0. So in this case, we want to return not this, but something else. So let's say that. Let's say return, and then we return a paragraph, and we can again use that class name of message from before, so that we already formatted. So no facts for this category yet. Create the first one. So encouraging your people, your users to participate. Maybe we can even add some nice emoji here. Let's say it doesn't really matter, right? I like to use this one. All right, so that looks a bit nicer here. And this actually works even though we didn't use the else. So we could have said, if this is true, then return this, or else like this. No. So if else, then return this. But that's not really necessary, because in JavaScript functions, if we return something, then the rest of the code is not even executed. So here we return this p element, and so then the rest of the component will never be executed. React will never see it. And so we don't need to wrap it here into the else block. Let's remove this. We can remove here as well, because it's just one line. So just one return. And yeah, so here, of course, we then get our actual data, because here the length of the array is not 0. So then this is false. This will not happen, but this will happen. Great. So we finished another lecture. A great job. And our application is getting almost ready. So we're almost done here. What we're going to do next is to make our form not only add a new fact to the local state, but also actually upload it to Supabase. So that will make this application then really complete. And so hopefully I see you in the next lecture soon, where we will do that together.